Okay. Illegitimate Scholar Podcast, Episode 5. I got to get like a intro or a song or something, because it's got to be jarring to just hear me awkwardly going like, okay, when it starts. Like, that's not a good introduction. Theo Vaughn's got like this cool-ass song that he starts with. It's really catchy. That's probably why they do that. I don't know. I'm not that smart. I have to find another one. I'll find one. I'll do something eventually. I got to take some ideas from people I know that are more creative in an artistic way like that than I am. Okay, so today, episode 5, Illegitimate Scholar Podcast. I'm going to try to go to bi-weekly. That means I have to, a Monday and Thursday show, and that means I have to, double my output of these, and that's acceptable as long as I plan it around a lot of the traveling that I do, because I travel quite a bit, probably about a third of the time I'm gone. So, and more than that this month. I'm gone about half of this month. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about transgenderism. And I'm not talking about transgenders on like an individual personal level. Like, I'm not going to be talking about individual transgender people and what they can or can't do. I mean, that's weird. You can't stop someone from doing something, but what is societally acceptable? Like, I'm not tackling like the political and the interpersonal aspects of personal transgender people. What I am tackling is like a big societal level macro type thing, like I do most of the time here. So I want to make very clear that like this is not a critique of transgenderism. That's not what this is going to be. And if you perceive it that way, please send me an email and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. But yeah, that's not what I'm going for today. I'm just going for an examination about the shifting cultural ideas behind how we deal with, and when I say deal with, I mean, how society views transgender people and their identities and how we view identities of genders in general in our society and also in past societies. So I'm going to, like I normally do, use some examples of some other cultures. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with talking about a few other genders and other cultures. And, yes, there is a long history of multiple genders in many different civilizations, but they're different. They're often different. They serve different purposes. And I'm going to compare that to how transgenderism fits into society as a whole today. And then I'm going to talk about the documentary, What is a Woman, by Matt Walsh. It's a recent controversial documentary done by the Daily Wire, which is a right-wing commentator organization that does a lot of stuff like this. Also, Candace Owens. I don't know much about Matt Walsh, but while Candace Owens is controversial, she's somebody that I admire. I don't agree with her on most things, but, I admire her as an individual. And then we're going to talk about our culture in the future. So I'm going to start out, and I'm going to start talking about transgender in other cultures. And the first one is one that a lot of people who have looked into other genders at all probably know about, because it's the closest to us in the United States. I think it's the most easily palatable, is Berdache. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but Two-Spirit. And this is a part of multiple Native American cultures. And in some cases, and I'm sure this is not all cases, it's men that wore women's clothing. They had specific ritual roles. So these people were a third gender, third, fourth, fifth, whatever gender, that they served specific ritual roles, and they were mediators between men and women a lot of times. And I think this is likely because they are viewed as having the spirit of both a man and a woman, so they're able to see that common perspective. And that's that seems like a good purpose for somebody, and a good way that they can use their personal identity to fit into that society and help that culture. And I forgot to mention that as I talk about these, I want, and if you I feel weird saying I want you to think about this, but I think it would be beneficial for, as I'm talking about these other cultures, genders, to think about how these these genders served that culture, what purpose they served for that culture, because culture, including genders and gender roles, not just for transgender people, for third, fourth genders, but also for the genders of men and women, what it means to be that certain thing, that is part of culture. And culture is many things we've talked about, but culture is about trying to perpetuate itself. The culture interacts with its human and physical environment, and it makes rules, and it makes guidelines, and it guides people's lives so that they're prosperous. And what that means is very different in different types of cultures and how they develop. So these two-spirit people, in the past at least, I don't know how much this still happens, but these two-spirit people, there was a, they served this specific role as mediators. They had a place in society as their identity. This ambiguous, this person with ambiguous gender is, they're recognized by the society, and they serve a purpose. I know I've said that a few times, but they're helping the society by being who they are, and they found a place where they can help the society perpetuate itself by being this bridge between men and women. And then we have something I learned about, which is sworn virgins in Albania. And these are women that take a male identity and they live a male role. They do men's work, and they're often the patriarchs of families. And the key to the societal purpose that sworn virgins serve is that there were a lot of blood feuds in Albania. Blood feuds where a family, a clan would fight another clan, and these are common in a lot of different cultures throughout history. A lot of them, especially they're mostly associated with, in America at least, they're mostly associated with Scots people and Scots-Irish people, and the descendants of Scots people and Scots-Irish people in Appalachia. The Hatfields and McCoys are a very famous example of that, and those are people that came from, and those were the descendants of Scots and Scots-Irish people. But it happens in a bunch of places. In this case, in Albania, the sworn virgins, this started out of a time when there was a taboo against an all-female family, against a family that didn't have a patriarch, like a lead male in the family. So somebody who was a sworn virgin, if all their male family members are killed, they can serve that male role, and they're recognized as a male as long as they swear their chastity at that point. So a woman can take this role and live as a man. Okay, so this one's a little bit different. And, I picked a bunch of different ones because I wanted to, I wanted it to be a diverse group of things. But eunuchs. So eunuchs were used in multiple courts. I think they're most often associated with the Mongols, like steppe tribes courts, Islamic caliphates courts. I think they served as well. And the one I'm going to talk about is Chinese emperors' courts. So eunuchs they're castrated men, and so this is a third gender. And they perform specific services for the empire, and they take care of the emperor's concubines. They're, today we just call them sex slaves, is kind of what it is. Although a lot of them probably liked to be in this position. They were very well cared for, but they could have been, taken sometimes against their will. They might have wanted to go because it's a very pampered life and it's a high status for their family, but that doesn't mean they had a choice. So, there's a level of not being free here, and when it's tied to sex, it gets very uncomfortable. But like I've talked about before, the idea of consent is a pretty modern idea. At least the importance of it in our current conception of what consent means. So eunuchs, these castrated men, they're not going to have sex with the concubines, with the wives of the emperor, because they can't. You know, they don't have they're not equipped to do that. So it's gender, and just like with the women not maybe wanting to be concubines and forced into that position, unfortunately, also these were mostly young boys who don't have a choice about their testicles being taken from them, and that's also uncomfortable. But these are people, and even though they are, you know, this might not have been a choice for these young men to become eunuchs. That is, in effect, what happens, and they culturally are a third gender. And you know, it's not like transgenders in America are choosing to become eunuchs. I mean, I'm sure there's one oddball out there who's doing that, but that's not really what we're doing here. And that's why I'm bringing up these other genders, because I want to show how they're different and how they're similar to our conception of transgenderism in America, which has become such a common thing. So the next one, I think this is my last one. Yeah. Okay. So hijaras, I think I'm pronouncing that right. And I'm just going to quote from a Harvard case study on this, because I don't want to get this wrong and have a bunch of Hindus yelling at me in my email. Although I would love that, because I would love for people to actually listen to the bullshit that I have to say. But until that happens, I will just get used to, you know, making sure that I don't piss off people with, you know, saying something that may or may not be true in specific cases, because most of the time these generalizations that come out of academic journals or really anything, they never tell the whole story. If you're someone from any culture, I mean, even American culture, if you've ever tried to see what other people think about our culture, you know, people get it wrong. People get other cultures wrong because they're viewing them through the lens of their own culture. So it's always a good idea to take what you know with a grain of salt. And that is to say that, you know, don't think that your understanding of another culture is based in fact. It's ultimately based in opinion and argument. But regardless, this is why I'm quoting from the Harvard study, so I don't get personally blamed, is hijara are expected to perform dances, songs, and blessings at both births and weddings of Hindus. To many Hindus, a hijara or hidra's blessings of a baby will confer fertility, prosperity, and long life on the child. 1 to 2 days after a marriage ceremony, hijaras will perform to bless the couple for fertility. And I know that Hinduism is not quite the same as Western religions like Christianity or Judaism, or and I'm putting Islam in that as well, these Abrahamic religions. So there's a lot of diversity in Hinduism that is kind of lost in how we discuss Hinduism in the West. And, you know, North American schools do teach about Hinduism. They do. But like I said, it's through the lens of our own understanding of religion. So I assume this is not true for all Hindus, and it might even be different based on caste. So I don't know if this is always true, but this is for some Hindus, I assume, because I don't think Harvard would just straight up lie about something like this, that they do serve this ceremonial purpose. And so all four of these genders that I've discussed so far, they're all serving a specific purpose that works within the culture, and it perpetuates the culture because it's part of their customs, and they're recognized for who they are, and the how they're different from what you'd call the two main genders in most cultures. I think probably all of them, unless you're just talking about LGBTQ culture specifically, the majority of people are going to be either a man or a woman. But, you know, for people who maybe don't feel like they fit into those two guidelines, these third genders they're another box that somebody can try to fit into, and maybe they fit in there more. Maybe it's not perfect, and maybe people who are identifying as men and women, it's not perfect for them either, but it's another box that somebody can try to fit into if their characteristics, their personal beliefs more match the ideas, the life, the clothes, the whatever they do. So I'm going to come back to this later, but all of these are based on a shared cultural idea of what it means, and of what it means to be these genders: men, women, Berdache, sworn virgins. Like, they're based on a shared cultural understanding. So these are not fully individual, and that's how I want to transition, and I'm going to come back to this later, but talking about the documentary, What is a Woman? So this is a documentary by a guy named Matt Walsh, who I hadn't really heard of before, who went around and asked a bunch of different people interview questions. A lot of people who work in gender affirmation. He talked to therapists, school teachers. He talked to people with varying opinions about using hormones on children. There was a wide range of opinion on this. He even interviews some African Maasai tribesmen about their perception of gender in their society. So the cornerstone question that he asks in these interviews, and the name of the documentary, is what is a woman? And my answer to what is a woman, and what a lot of people in the documentary would say, is whoever identifies as a woman. And when I saw him doing these interviews, he's asking people, what is a woman? And I'm answering like, come on, man, like, you get it. Whoever identifies as a woman. But what I realized when he started saying, yes, but what is that? What he's asking for, and I had to pause the documentary and just think for a few minutes, because I was like, what am I getting wrong here? Like, what is, like, this isn't quite adding up. And the reason is that when somebody's asking, what is a woman? And your answer is whoever identifies as a woman, you're not defining what a woman is. You're answering who a woman is. So who is a woman? The answer is whoever wants to be a woman. But when you ask what is a woman, the root of the answer needs to be what being a woman means. Who is a woman? What are the parameters for what a woman is? So to be a woman, you have to fit inside these parameters that we create as a society that become culturally acceptable. And what are those parameters? And there are no parameters anymore. There can't be parameters, because any sort of parameters, any sort of description that you could put on that would say, here's what a woman is, that would disclude somebody. It would exclude somebody from the possibility of being a woman. Because if a woman has parameters, if what a woman is parameters, then somebody is going to be outside of those parameters. And somebody then who might consider themselves a woman is no longer considered a woman by greater society, because they don't fit into that definition of what a woman is. And to me, what I think is happening is that in postmodern thought, in Western thought, there's hyper-individuality, which is not normal. It's not common in most of human history. So there's hyper-individuality, and there is inclusivity to a fault. So you have to be inclusive. There can't be any sort of lack of inclusivity. So there can be no exclusion whatsoever. And if there can be no exclusion, there can't be any parameters. There cannot be any definitions of these things that are tied to someone's personal identity. You can't define what a man is if by defining what a man is, you disclude somebody from being a man. So while these sworn virgins, two-spirit, eunuchs, they're a third gender, and they're this third gender that serves a different purpose in each of their societies. There are parameters on what that means, on what that third gender does and is. Just like there are parameters in those societies and formally in our society on what a man and a woman is and does. So what I see is an extreme devotion to individuality and an extreme devotion to inclusivity. And I think in a lot of ways this is good. It's good to live in an inclusive society where people are able to do what they want to do, where, you know, black people are not limited to certain jobs, certain neighborhoods, where women are not limited to certain jobs, where they're not hemmed into being homemakers. But at the same time, I think that everyone would be better served by having cultural roles, cultural genders that respect people's personal identity and their dignity, and at the same time serve our culture. And when I'm looking at this, what I'm looking at is when I think about our views of gender in society, and when I think about a lot of things in society, I think about the amount of mental health issues that we have in Western society, and how when a nation starts industrializing and essentially joining the first world, their suicide rates go up. And there are multiple explanations by that, but I see a culture in crisis, and I don't just see and I don't just see it with transgender people. You know, transgender people, pre-op, post-op, many of them at a higher rate than the rest of the population experience a lot of mental health issues, and there are a lot of explanations for that. Some people think that it's because of the discrimination that they receive, and you know, that's probably part of it. I wouldn't be surprised, but at the same time, it seems like discrimination against transgender people isn't. It's not what it used to be. You know, there was a transphobic as hell scene in like Ace Ventura in the 90s. You couldn't even think about doing that today. Not a AAA studio or really anyway. But what I'm saying is that, you know, I have a lot of compassion for all people across the world, for all Americans. And when I see transgender people having these higher rates of mental illness, regardless of what they do in regards to making their physical appearance match their inner appearance, you know, I want to help them. And I want to live in a culture that helps them. And I want our culture to be formed in a way that makes people feel affirmed in their personal identity, definitely, that makes them feel comfortable in their own skin, that makes them feel healthy and happy. I want to live in a culture that promotes all those things. And so I'm not critiquing transgenderism at all. I hope that's very clear. This is about looking at what other cultures have done in transgender and seeing what possibly and discussing what we can do as a society to create something that works for our culture and works for our people, because we have very specific technology in the modern Western world that's basically unprecedented, and our cultural beliefs and practices have to contend with that, and it's very hard to do, but especially with how quickly the technology is changing, but it needs to happen. But this extreme individuality, to me, the extreme individuality that we have, and I'm going to go into this in other videos, you know, I have no shortage of topics to discuss, but that is at the root of a lot of our issues. I feel that extreme individuality is not what humans are meant to have. Humans are communal creatures. They're supposed to work, and they do in their most traditional settings in hunter-gatherer communities. They live communally, and there isn't this, you know, I don't want to say capitalism, but that's kind of the economic structure that organizes us. It's not natural in the sense that it's culture. It is culture. Like capitalism is culture, and how you distribute goods is culture, but it's not innate to humans. When humans were living with as little technology as possible as hunter-gatherers, they weren't using money. They were living mostly communally in communally, the root of communism. But these were, groups of 150 people, tribes of 150 people with maybe a few bands in them. And so I'm not supporting communism. It just doesn't work when you get up to that level. The command, I'll talk about that later, but command economies just don't work. Maybe they could eventually with some sort of supercomputer, but we'll probably kill ourselves by then. So this hyper-individuality, which is behind the way that transgenderism is viewed in Western culture, is that your identity can be whatever you want it to be. There's not going to be a third, fourth, fifth gender. I mean, there is, but then there's going to be a sixth, seventh, eighth, like 85th. Like somebody might come out and say there's as many genders as there are people, and somebody might believe that. And like I've said before, I think that applies to religion, but I don't think it applies to culture, because culture is shared. And culture and gender is a part of culture, and I don't think there should be. I mean, there can be, because I respect people's individuality, but as a culture, I don't think that that's the right way to go, because gender being tied to culture, it should be, in my opinion, shared. There should be a shared understanding of what it means to allow people to have parameters and what it means to be whatever they are, so they can work towards that. And I would want to have a place in society for all people to fit into in those parameters. If it takes a few different genders to do that, I think that's okay, but I don't see that happening right now. And I just would hope that as we move into the future, there is, there's something that comes out that helps people in the West be a little more happy, content with their lives, have purpose in their lives, that a lot of us seem to be losing. Okay. So, yeah, my notes here are they're not very positive. I'm not confident it's healthy for our long-time society. Yeah, I don't think that what we're doing right now is healthy, and I think the trends are getting worse, and I think this is just one of the many things that that is a symptom of that. And when I say that, I don't mean transgenderism in general. I mean the way that not transgenderism, but just gender is being handled, because the individuality is taking over, and there's no shared definition. There just isn't anymore. Some people think about what being a man is, but they're thinking about it more in traditional ideas of what being a man is. There isn't one in society that's kind of accepted, because publicly you wouldn't be allowed to define what a man is. You'd probably get canceled for something like that. People would view you as a dinosaur. So yeah, closing thoughts. I just hope that we figure out genders in a shared way that will help our people as individuals. And when I say our people, I mean all Americans, all people in the West, and really all people in the world will have identities that are fulfilling to them, that provide them with peace and happiness. Yeah, but I don't see it happening at this point. I think there has to be a major shift, but that kind of stuff does happen. So, all right, this is my shortest one so far, but I'm going to get off, and let me know what you